is that Mitch and Jane called and said, we've got early stage dementia and we're going to talk about this. It's the first time, I mean, I have run meetings and sessions where I've invited people with early stage or mid stage dementia to be part of the decision-making process. It's very hard. There's been fights in National Alzheimer's Association to have you involved. So I took that, I mean, this is a great honor to be part of this, in part because we're not having experts saying we want you to talk about your expertise, and the reason this is important is that I'm going to talk about hope. And to me, what you've heard from everybody so far, Mitch and Jane and also Jen, Pat, Jalen, is hope. Namely, we can do something about this situation. And the stigma and the fear that you talked about in Still Alice, you know, that it's, oh my God, there's no, is the despair part of this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this, and I want to thank you for inviting me and being here and organizing it. So if you just press, can you use this?
I'm not sure.
I don't think so. Let me just see if it works.
I think you can use your laptop.
Well, there's the laptop. Just press over here, right on the entrance. I'm going to talk about a little program, actually, that Eric is in.
Want me to press enter?
Yeah. And keep going.
Okay.
Okay. So a lot of us, I mean, when people are thinking about what am I going to do, and looking at all those resources that you talked about, somebody says, you go in, I mean, this was your story, Pat, which is people were coming to your father's place, and they wanted to get him out of the way because they didn't want to be like that sick guy over there. I'm not like that. And that's an attitude that we hear a lot about. It's a despair attitude. You gotta, Eric, we're only gonna do it if we go further along. So keep going. So I'm gonna talk about hope. And hope is really what you've been talking about. It's just an illness. It's, I can live my life. I can do things. We can help each other. As Pat said, we can influence, and the way you behave affects your father. And the fact that that he was correcting all those Tasmanian names, because at least there was a connection.
Right.
So we have a choice, and everybody here, you've already made this choice. And the choice is between despair and hope, between the Still Alice message, and I read it too, never thought of it that way, but clearly that's what you heard, and the Mitch Jane message. So let me describe what that means. When you face a situation of despair, and dementia is one of those, cancer would be another, life is, some people when they have babies, they despair too because it's an ambiguous situation. What am I going to do with this kid to bring this kid up? You have a choice, and you can either say, this is really terrible and I can't do anything about it, it overwhelms me. We become afraid. We go, oh my God, I'm afraid, and we get angry. That's one way to approach dementia. The other way is to say, I've got some hope in this situation. I think I can do something about it. I can at least live life in the present. I can bring someone in who I can correct, I can make a meaningful life. I can write a blog. I can organize this meeting, and I commend you on it. And if you approach ambiguous situations with hope, you get curious. You say, what can I do? What am I going to do here? I can write a blog. You say, I won't give my last name, but of course I'll give it to you if you want to get me on Facebook. And we become creative. That's what hope brings about. The despair model looks like this. You see the negative, and all you do is say the future is going to be terrible. And we say it's a downhill slope from here. So we get sad, you get depressed. You talked about your depression in the beginning. You don't do anything because you say there's nothing to do. People abandon you. One of the things, I do a TV program. In fact, I interviewed Senator Jalen on one of these TV programs called Hopeful Aging with Dr. John Zeisel. We do it out in Bedford, but it's on YouTube. And one of the people I interviewed said, and had done a lot of research, she said, The diagnosis was not the problem. I was relieved when I got the diagnosis. The problem was the way people treated me. They abandoned me. They wouldn't talk to me. Nobody calls me anymore. So abandonment happens, and then what I call the 4 A's of Alzheimer's, anxiety, agitation, apathy, and aggression, increase. Loneliness increases, and we medicalize things, and it goes downhill from there. And the relationship dies because people aren't there to be with you. The alternative is the hope model. And the hope model says what you said. So I'm just really putting a few words on what both of you talked about, which is be in the present, right? Be sad. We grieve and we are sad when bad things happen. We don't have to say, oh, isn't this great? I have a brain scan, I can't work anymore. That's ridiculous. Of course you're sad. But you don't let that grief dominate your life, which you did in the beginning. Right? You said, I can't, and I mustn't, and I can't. And all of a sudden, something happened to you where you said, I'm still here, I'm a person, and I appreciate my abilities. As you said, you can still talk better than me sometimes. I'm listening to myself talk compared to you. And so, you know, the difficulty is we can't find somebody to pay you for those abilities, but you have those, and so we start to identify that. And if other people identify that for us, we are in fact treating the condition. In other words, if the family members support you, so we do things together with the person, we don't abandon, less loneliness, less apathy, less aggression, less agitation, less anxiety, and a relationship can take place. And that's why you read, in my book I talk about people can still have a vibrant relationship, as could you, Pat, with your father, once you realized there was something in that, something there and a person there and you could deal with it. So hope is really the message of tonight. And I was taking some notes. I mean, the blog you're talking about, the fact that you're reaching out to people, the fact that you put up flyers that say, come talk to me, I'll give you a hand, that's hope. And it lies in people saying about themselves, but also about others, we can make a difference. So there's a colleague of mine at Harvard named Marshall Gantz, and he talks about hope, the public narrative of hope in the public sector. He says, politicians can either bring hope to the story or they can bring despair. And we see that in our national politics today. What's the message? And the message of hope is you can make a difference. It's not, I cross my fingers and hope things are going to get better. That's not the point. You can make a difference. So YCMAD is what we mean by hope. Just keep on poking. So I have an idea, which I'm just going to throw out and put it, I used to put it at the end of this talk, or a talk like this, which is if we got a group together, if you got your family and whoever it is you're working with, same with you, and we turned to each other, 6 people around a table, and I said, how can I make a difference in your life? Maybe it's calling you every evening. Maybe somebody is your husband, who's really paranoid and worried about it. And I mean, not paranoid, he's worried about the stigma, and it's real. So I could say, what could we do to make your life better? And if we could go around a circle and create a circle of hope where everybody helps each other make a difference, I think we would start to find a growth of hope as a social phenomenon. You want to? Did it stop? Oh, it went away again. I'm sorry. I've been talking about hope. So this is hope. We can make a difference here. You want to press it again? That's okay. Let's see if it goes. There you go. Press it again. Okay. So there are a bunch of myths, despair myths about dementia that are often spread by people who want us to give money for a cure. And the reason they do that is they want to say how terrible everything is, how despairing it is, how we can't make a difference, and to heck with the people who already have a dementia for any reason, because that's not what the research is going to help. If I get a dementia today, the research into a drug or the research into it's not going to help me. It might help my kids, which is fine. But today, the people who have it, and we've got talking about, they say 5 million, it's probably 6, 7 million people. In this country, it's 45 million people in the world. And if you multiply 45 million by the 20 people who love them, you're talking about billions of people who are dealing with dementia worldwide. So we're now going to go through a bunch. I'm going to go relatively. So the first despair myth is people with dementia can't remember. Now, Mitch has dementia. He remembered everything you wrote down and what you described. Now, you needed the cue to give the talk.
Right. Yeah.
By the way, my cue is, these aren't the first time I've seen these slides. And I look at them a lot to remember them. And sometimes I have to go through it over and over again by myself to remind myself what's behind each one of these little circles, which is going to flip. So you can see right here, Mitch remembers, Jane remembers. People with dementia can remember. Now, there's a specific way, part of our remembering that works a different way, and it's called procedural memory. And that is, if you do something over and over and over again, like remember things, tell stories, ride a bike, write your signature, drive, you don't forget those procedural things. That's why sports in high school is an important thing, because people learn physical things that they never forget. So procedurally we can remember. If you press, that goes around in a circle. And people can remember. Now, we need the cues, whether it's this, whether it's somebody helping us. So my mother lived to 100, I usually say she died at 105. It's sort of interesting, first time in years, a few years ago. So my mother lived to 105. When she was 103 and 102, she kept working until she was like 102 or something. But she was a designer, so she could do that procedurally. It wasn't up here, it was like making things. So my sister was around a lot more in New York, and my cousin's name is John, so I'd call up and she'd say, which John is this? And I didn't like that, so I said, I'm your son, John. And she said, well, of course I know. But once in a while, she said to me, what's your relationship to Jean? Because Jean was my sister was the staple. And I'd say, I'm your son, I'm John, and he's my sister, and we both love you a lot. It was fine. She remembered everything. But even then, at 102, with no dementia of a straightforwardness, I mean, something called dementia, I still needed to give her a cue to remember. We all need cues to remember, and we all can remember. And everything you did was remembering today. And the stories you told, even about the fears or about Still Alice and how you felt, those are all memories. They're all right there. The second is no attention span. You hear people with dementia have no attention span. We started in New York the first museum program for people with dementia at the Museum of Modern Art. And now my foundation runs a museum program in a museum around Boston, one of 13 museums all the way out to Worcester, every week. We run a program. Yesterday there were 20 people at, I don't know where they were, I think it might have been, what? It might have been the PBD Essex Museum. So we run a program every week for people with dementia. Now, if it's boring, and don't forget what Mitch said was, I'm not bored. If you're bored, we can't focus. But if you give people something interesting, if you show them the PBD Essex as Chinese art, it's a center of Chinese art, and you show them something interesting and say, what do you think about this? People sit for hours. Now, the whole program is an hour and a half, but after 15 minutes, we say, it's time to go away. And she said, why? We're enjoying this painting. We're talking about it. So meaningful things is a treatment. Doing interesting things and keeping doing interesting things is a form of treatment because it gives us the ability to focus. The third is people say, well, my father isn't in the aggressive phase yet. And I said, well, what do you mean? They say, well, you know, what do you do with him? He said, well, he lives at home, and we go to this, and we do this, and we do that. I said, he's not aggressive because you're doing the right stuff. Aggression in dementia comes about, it's not a condition, it's not a symptom. Aggression is the result of frustration, anxiety, being confronted with something, somebody getting in your face and saying, why did you do that, and what's wrong with you, why are you, you know, that, you felt a little aggressive, I hope, when I got you, but you didn't strike me because you can control those impulses. So there is something called impulse control. If we can engage people positively, if we don't make people frightened, if we don't, if we give them cues, if we're kind, we can reduce aggression to 0 with dementia. It's not a condition.